talk about the book of Galatians and get sort of the structural questions you might start to see within this book. Now, Galatia is in Asia Minor, and this book may have gone to one particular group or may have been a couple different churches within Asia Minor. It's arguably one of the two oldest of Paul's letters, at least that's the general consensus these days. Again, 48 to 52 AD kind of time frame, and if you think about it, that's roughly 15 to 20 years from Jesus' resurrection. So that's pretty recent in terms of timing. This is probably either just before or just after the Jerusalem Council. That would be in Acts 15, a very important kind of point in this conversation. And the main issue in this is asking the question of circumcision, particularly, do Gentiles need to be circumcised? In terms of that, but it's a little more subtle than that. It's a question of, are there levels of faith? In other words, there's certainly a sense of being accepted in the Christian community, being saved and so forth, but then is there like a meta level? Like, oh, now if you're a Gentile but you're now circumcised, you're an actually more important Christian than the previous one. And then are there other more important Christians in different places? This is a strange thing, I realize, because for most people in current Christian sense, we don't have any problem whatsoever of being levels within Christian community. Everybody understands we're all the same. There's not trying to one-up people, which would have been very typical in the religions in the Greco-Roman age. Although, of course, as soon as you're hearing me, you're going, maybe not. If you've been in any church situations, communities, you realize we have these issues. And Paul is quite clear about this. And in fact, this is arguably this is clearly his angriest letter, and he's furious that this is something that's happening. And it's one of the earliest of the letters, so this is actually a really, really important thing. In fact, you can kind of tell this from the structure, right? Because from the very early structure, there's a greeting that's fairly straightforward, with a little bit of sharpness to it. And he starts off with, I am astonished. No thanksgiving, no I'm glad for all that you've done. Like, no, I'm pretty angry here. And then he works through this whole conversation of his early Christian days of ministry, kind of really cementing that and his relationship to Peter, and for him saying he pushed back on Peter, saying you should not be doing these things. And this is what frames the entire conversation. And then you begin to get in these conversations of one is righteous by faith. It is not by what you do. In other words, it's not by whether you're circumcised or not, whether you're Jewish or not. All are the same. Abraham is the same. We are free. There's this conversation between Sarah and Hagar, which is rather interesting and arguably one of the more creative sort of metaphors pulled out of this. You see things on circumcision, just kind of going through this, and then the life in the Spirit, his personal comments, which are a little bit edgy, like, please, no one cause me trouble again, and then just one verse closing. All of this is really, really important as you start to look at various pieces here. But I think one of the things that you see out of this whole range here is that, so in Jesus Christ, you are all children of God through faith. You're all baptized. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. That middle verse is a very famous verse, and everyone likes to use it in many places. But notice two things that border this. There's neither Jew nor Gentile. And that's very central to the conversation here. Circumcision matter? No, it doesn't. One being coming in from a Jewish perspective, great. One coming in from a Gentile perspective, great. All are important. It does not mean we don't care about the Jewish heritage. In fact, quite the opposite. It's very, very important. But it doesn't make one a more superior Christian than not. Notice also it says this is one place where there's neither male nor female. It doesn't matter. Because if you're female, you don't get circumcised. Or at least you really shouldn't be. And so that's where some really interesting questions come into play, and you can see the focus. But here's the thing. If you just look at that verse out of context, it sounds very nice. There's a lot of interesting things, but realizing it is within a larger structure, really begins to give it some strength and some teeth into what Paul is actually trying to do. And this is one of those beautiful things of building through the structural aspect of these books, because then you can see it as a complete whole that really gives you some insight into what each of the passages and the structure is doing.